Diane Bennett lifted her glass and smiled as if she were about to offer a heartfelt family toast. "I just want to say how grateful I am," she began, scanning the crowded dining room, "that at least one of my daughters turned into someone this family can actually be proud of." A few relatives nodded toward my older sister, Emily, who forced a polite smile. Then my mother's eyes landed on me. "As for Tracy," she laughed softly, "well, every family has an embarrassment." The room went silent. My father didn't object. Instead, he slowly nodded. "Your mother's right," he said. "You had every opportunity and you wasted them." Someone near the end of the table let out an awkward chuckle before quickly looking away. I lowered my eyes to my untouched plate. I had heard these words so many times that defending myself no longer felt possible. Then a chair scraped sharply across the hardwood floor. My grandmother, who hadn't spoken through the entire meal, pushed herself upright with both hands gripping her cane. Her voice was calm. "If you're finally finished, humiliating the only child who ever sacrificed anything for this family." She turned and looked directly at my mother. Then it's time everyone heard the truth. No one spoke. Not even my mother. For the first time that evening, she looked uncertain. The annual Bennett family reunion had always been my least favorite day of the year. Every summer, nearly 30 relatives crowded into my grandparents' old farmhouse. The backyard filled with folding tables, children chased each other across the lawn, and someone inevitably insisted on taking another family photo. From the outside, we looked like the kind of family people envied. Inside, everyone already knew their place. Emily was the success story. I was the disappointment. My mother had spent years reinforcing that division until no one questioned it anymore. Emily had become a successful corporate attorney. She drove a luxury SUV, lived in an upscale neighborhood, and never arrived anywhere without compliments following her. I coordinated community health programs for low-income families. According to my mother, that meant I had settled. "Your sister aimed high," she'd remind anyone willing to listen. "Tracy always chose the easy road." Tonight, she wasn't satisfied with making those comparisons in private. She wanted an audience. She gestured toward me as though presenting evidence. She could have been a lawyer too. Instead, she drives that old sedan that barely starts. Several relatives shifted uncomfortably. "And that little community job," she continued. "It's sweet, I suppose, but let's not pretend she's living up to her potential." Each sentence landed like it had been rehearsed. I kept my hands folded in my lap. Arguing had never helped. Defending myself had only made things worse. Across the table, Emily wouldn't meet my eyes. Whether she was embarrassed for me or embarrassed by me, I couldn't tell anymore. Then I noticed Grandma. She hadn't touched her dinner. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at my mother with an expression I'd never seen before. Not sadness. Disappointment. Slowly, she tightened her grip on her cane and rose to her feet. Every conversation around the room stopped. Even the children outside seemed quieter. She took one steady breath before fixing her gaze on Diane. Then she spoke in a voice that carried through the entire room. "Diane." She paused long enough that every person leaned forward. "Are you truly prepared to keep lying about what happened 22 years ago?" The color drained from my mother's face. No one moved. The question hung over the dining room like a storm cloud. My mother recovered first. She forced a short laugh and waved one hand dismissively. "Mom, please, this isn't the time." Grandma didn't sit down. "I asked you a question." I felt every pair of eyes turn toward me. My stomach tightened. "Grandma," I said quietly, "please don't." She looked at me with the same gentle expression she'd worn since I was a little girl. "You've protected everyone long enough, Tracy." I shook my head almost imperceptibly. "I don't want this." "I know." For a brief moment, neither of us noticed anyone else in the room. Then my cousin Rachel broke the silence. What is everyone talking about? No one answered. Instead, the room filled with uneasy glances. Several relatives had clearly realized there was a story they had never been told. Uncle Mark leaned toward my father. Frank, do you know what your mother means? My father frowned. I have no idea. His answer surprised even him. He looked toward my mother, expecting her to explain. She folded her arms. She's confused. Grandma let out a slow breath. No. My mother smiled tightly. She's 83. Sometimes memories become mixed. A few relatives nodded sympathetically. I closed my eyes. I'd seen this happen before. Whenever Grandma hinted at the past, my mother would gently question her memory until everyone dropped the subject. It always worked. Grandma looked at me. Tell them. I swallowed. I can't. You can. I won't. Her shoulders sagged slightly. Not from disappointment. From understanding. She knew exactly why. Because telling the truth wouldn't only expose my mother. It would tear apart the family I'd spent years trying to hold together. Rachel looked between us. Tracy, what's going on? Before I could answer, my mother stepped in. Nothing is going on. She picked up her glass again. Can we please stop ruining dinner? Nobody reached for their food. The atmosphere had completely changed. Across the table, Aunt Linda quietly studied me. You know, she said thoughtfully, I've always wondered something. The room turned toward her. You graduated at the top of your class. I nodded once. You were accepted into one of the best universities in the country. Another nod. I remember everyone celebrating. So do I, Uncle Mark added. You received a full scholarship, didn't you? I looked down at the tablecloth. Yes. Rachel frowned. Wait. She looked around the room. If Tracy had a full scholarship. She hesitated. Why didn't she go? Silence. Before anyone else could speak, my mother answered without missing a beat. Because she wasn't ready. Her tone was confident. College-like that requires discipline, Tracy realized she couldn't handle the pressure. Several relatives accepted the explanation with slow nods. I didn't argue. I never had. Grandma's fingers tightened around the handle of her cane until her knuckles turned white. She looked directly at my mother. So that's still the story. My mother met her eyes without flinching. It's the truth. No. Grandma took one careful step forward. That's the lie you've repeated for 22 years. A cold silence settled over the room. Then Grandma asked, her voice quieter than before but impossible to ignore. Deanne, are you really willing to lie about that night one more time? The question left my mother's smile frozen in place. My mother's smile vanished almost as quickly as it had appeared. She gave a small shake of her head and looked around the room as if appealing to everyone else. Please don't encourage this, she said. Mom's tired. She doesn't remember things the way they happened anymore. A few relatives exchanged uncertain glances. My father shifted in his chair. Diane, maybe we should just help her sit down. Grandma didn't move. Instead, she planted the tip of her cane firmly against the floor. My memory is perfectly clear. Her eyes found mine again. Tracy. I knew what she was about to ask before she said it. No. Her voice softened. Please. I stared at her. For years, she'd respected my wish to leave the past buried. Now she was asking me to undo that promise. She nodded toward the staircase. In my bedroom, she said, the wooden box at the back of the closet. The room fell completely silent. My mother took a hurried step forward. There's no reason for that. There is every reason. I said leave it alone. Grandma met her daughter's gaze without blinking. No, Diane. For the first time in my life, my mother had been told no in front of the entire family. She stopped walking. No one spoke. I slowly climbed the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. At the back of Grandma's closet sat the small cedar box I hadn't touched in years. Dust covered the lid. I carried it downstairs with both hands. When I placed it on the dining table, every conversation ceased. Grandma rested one hand on the lid. "This," she said quietly, "contains the years everyone pretended never happened." She opened it. Inside lay carefully organized folders, tied with faded ribbons. There were university acceptance letters, scholarship certificates, hospital appointment calendars, medication schedules, handwritten notebooks. Every document bore my name. Rachel leaned closer. "Those are yours." I nodded. Uncle Mark picked up one of the calendars. Every day was filled with neat handwriting. Medication times, doctor visits, physical therapy appointments, emergency contacts. "It covers almost 3 years," he whispered. Grandma gently lifted one of the notebooks. "Read the first page." Rachel accepted it carefully. Her voice trembled as she read aloud. "Monday, Grandma couldn't keep breakfast down today. Called Dr. Harris at 8:15. Stayed awake until nearly 4 this morning because her fever returned." Rachel stopped. She looked at me. "You wrote this?" "Yes." She turned another page. Then another. Every entry described another exhausting day. Medication, bathing, cooking, appointments, sleepless nights. Not a single complaint. Only careful records. The room grew quieter with every page. My mother folded her arms. She helped for a while. Grandma looked at her. For a while. My mother forced another smile. We all did our part. No one answered. The documents on the table told a different story. Aunt Linda carefully picked up one of the hospital appointment sheets. Every visit listed only one caregiver. Tracy Bennett. The dates stretched across months. Then years. Emily stared at the papers. I've never seen any of this." "You weren't supposed to," Grandma replied. She looked around the room before continuing. "When I became seriously ill, someone stayed beside me every single day." She paused deliberately. "I'm not going to tell you who just yet." Confused murmurs spread through the family. If it wasn't Diane, then who was it? Why keep it secret? Questions began flying faster than answers. For the first time all evening, my mother looked genuinely unsettled. She reached toward the documents. "We're done here." Grandma calmly moved the box out of reach. "No." From the bottom of the cedar box, she removed a single cream-colored envelope that had remained sealed for decades. She held it up for everyone to see. Her hands were steady. "This." She looked directly at me before facing the rest of the family. "Is the letter that changed Tracy's entire life." With careful fingers, she broke the old seal and unfolded the paper. The sound of the envelope unfolding seemed impossibly loud in the silent dining room. No one reached for their food. No one spoke. Even my mother stood perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the paper in Grandma's hands. Grandma adjusted her glasses and smiled sadly. "I've kept this safe for 22 years. She handed the letter to my father. "You should read it." He hesitated. "What is it?" "The truth." My father unfolded the letter and began reading aloud. "Dear Miss Tracy Bennett, we are pleased to offer you a full academic scholarship to the School of Law." His voice faltered. He looked up at me in disbelief. "A full scholarship." I nodded once. He continued reading. The scholarship covered tuition, housing, books, and living expenses. Everything. There had been nothing standing between me and the future I'd dreamed about. Nothing except what happened a few weeks later. Rachel looked at me with wide eyes. You never told anyone. There wasn't anything to tell. There was everything to tell, Grandma replied quietly. Uncle Mark leaned over the table. If you earned this. He held up the acceptance letter. Why didn't you go? Nobody answered. Grandma folded her hands over her cane. Because Tracy didn't fail. She looked around the room. She didn't change her mind. Another pause. She didn't lose the scholarship. Every person at the table leaned forward. Someone asked her to stay. My mother immediately stepped in. Mom. Grandma raised one hand. And someone insisted that nobody else should ever know why. The room turned toward Diane. She looked offended. This is ridiculous. Is it? Grandma's voice remained calm. You've repeated the same story for 22 years. My mother crossed her arms. Because it's true. Before Grandma could answer, Aunt Linda picked up one of the caregiver's schedules lying on the table. She frowned. Wait. Everyone looked at her. I know this handwriting. She studied the page more carefully. I've seen Diane write grocery lists exactly like this. She held up the schedule. Diane, you wrote these notes. My mother glanced at the page. They don't prove anything. Aunt Linda shook her head. They prove someone assigned every doctor's appointment to Tracy. The room became even quieter. Uncle Mark reached for another folder. Inside were appointment confirmations. Each one listed the emergency contact. Tracy Bennett. Every single time. Emily slowly picked up one of the journals. Her hands trembled as she flipped through it. I don't understand. She looked at me. You never said you were taking Grandma to chemotherapy. Another page. You never mentioned the surgeries. Another. You were sleeping in the hospital. I didn't answer. There had never seemed to be a reason. Or perhaps I'd stopped believing anyone wanted the answer. Then Mr. Collins, one of Grandma's oldest friends who had attended nearly every family gathering for years, cleared his throat. I remember something. Everyone turned toward him. I used to visit your mother every Wednesday. He looked directly at Diane. You always told us you couldn't stay because you had work. He paused. But Tracy was always there. He frowned as another memory surfaced. And every time I thanked you for taking such good care of your mother. His eyes narrowed. You accepted the compliment. My mother's face stiffened. She opened her mouth, but no words came. The room no longer felt divided. It felt united against a single unanswered question. My father slowly lowered the scholarship letter. His voice was barely above a whisper. Diane. She refused to meet his eyes. He swallowed hard. What exactly? He looked across the table at me for the first time that evening, not with disappointment, but with confusion. Did Tracy give up? Grandma closed the cedar box gently. She looked at every member of the family before answering. Her voice broke with quiet sorrow. Everything. She drew one slow breath. And now? She looked directly at Diane. I'm going to tell all of you exactly how it happened. Here is the concluding section, following the locked outline. No one interrupted. Not even my mother. Grandma rested both hands on her cane before speaking again. 22 years ago, she began, I collapsed in this very house. The room remained perfectly still. The doctors told us I would survive, but only if someone stayed with me around the clock for months. She looked toward my mother. Diane had just accepted a promotion. My mother lowered her eyes. I remember asking for help. Grandma's voice never rose. I wasn't asking anyone to give up their life. I simply needed someone until I recovered. She turned to me. But Tracy had just received the opportunity she'd worked toward since she was a little girl. My father slowly looked down at the scholarship letter, still resting in his hands. Grandma continued. The university delayed her enrollment once. She looked around the table. Then twice. Her eyes became glassy. Each time, Diane promised me it would only be for a little while. Several relatives exchanged uneasy looks. Grandma drew a slow breath. Then one evening, Diane came to Tracy. She looked directly at me. I heard every word. The memories rushed back so vividly that I could almost hear my mother's voice again. Your grandmother needs you, Grandma repeated quietly. You're the only one who can do this. Just stay until she's stronger. My throat tightened. I believed her, I whispered. Grandma nodded. Of course you did. She faced the family again. Tracy never complained. She never blamed anyone. She simply unpacked the boxes she'd packed for university and moved into my spare bedroom. No one spoke. She cooked. She bathed me. She drove me to every appointment. She slept beside my hospital bed. When I couldn't walk, she carried me. When I was afraid, she stayed awake. Grandma wiped away a tear. Those few months became 3 years. My father covered his mouth. The scholarship letter slipped from his hand onto the table. When I finally recovered, Grandma continued, the scholarship had expired. She looked toward me with unmistakable pride. She never asked for another chance. I told her to tell everyone the truth. Grandma's voice trembled. But Tracy wouldn't. I looked down. I didn't want everyone to hate Mom. The words escaped before I could stop them. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Grandma slowly turned toward Diane. And what did you do? No answer. You told everyone Tracy wasn't ambitious. Still nothing. You accepted praise meant for her. My mother's shoulders sagged. You let your own daughter become the family disappointment because admitting the truth would have exposed your own selfishness. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She stared at me as though seeing me for the first time. I thought, she whispered. She couldn't finish. I thought you just didn't want more. I managed a faint smile. I wanted everything. She covered her face and began crying. I'm so sorry. One by one, other relatives began speaking. I judged you. We all did. I had no idea. I'm sorry, Tracy. No apology erased the years. But for the first time, no one looked at me with pity or disappointment. They looked at me with respect. My father slowly stood. He walked around the table until he was standing beside me. His voice shook. I failed you. I looked up at him. I believed what I was told. He swallowed hard. I should have asked you. He wrapped his arms around me. It was the first hug he'd initiated in years. Across the room, my mother remained seated. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. No one rushed to comfort her. No one defended her. The authority she had held over the family for decades disappeared in complete silence. Uncle Mark finally spoke. Family gatherings won't be run the way they've been. Several relatives nodded. Aunt Linda added quietly, We've spent years celebrating the wrong person. Grandma reached for my hand. No. She smiled gently. Today isn't about taking anyone's place. It's about putting the truth back where it belongs. Months later, life looked very different. I accepted a leadership position overseeing community health programs across the county, work that allowed me to help hundreds of families facing the kinds of impossible choices I'd once faced myself. Relatives who had barely spoken to me before now called simply to check in. Emily and I rebuilt our relationship slowly, honestly, without comparisons. As for my parents, I stopped trying to earn approval that should never have required sacrifice. I answered their calls when I chose to. I visited when it felt healthy. For the first time in my life, my boundaries weren't acts of rebellion. They were acts of self-respect. Grandma lived long enough to watch that change happen. One afternoon, we sat together on her porch watching the sun disappear behind the trees. She reached over and squeezed my hand. I've spent years wishing I had spoken sooner. I smiled. You spoke when it mattered. She looked at me with quiet pride. The truth couldn't give you back the years you sacrificed. She paused. But it finally gave you back your name. This time, there was nothing left to hide. Nothing left to prove. Only the truth, and the peace that finally came with it.